Hi, this is Amanda.
And this is Jen.
And you're listening to Just This, a podcast that explores everything around being and becoming a mother or parent.
We're excited to have you join us as we dive into the practical details as well as the unseen energetics on topics that span from preconception to years after birth.
All right. So co-sleeping.
Co-sleeping.
The reason I was thinking about this is because I was actually listening to that conversation about the fourth trimester. And we mentioned co-sleeping in there. And I was like, that would be something good to, I don't know, spend a good 20, who knows, 40 minutes.
How long can we talk about co-sleeping for?
Yeah. Surprised. We can spend a lot of time talking about any topic. The most boring topic, you give it to us.
You give it to us. We'll make it fun.
Yeah, I think co-sleeping is a good topic because I feel it is interesting, that it's just an interesting topic because most people end up doing some form of co-sleeping.
Yes.
And yet in the United States, at least, it is a kind of promoted as a big no-no.
It is. And the recommendation actually changed recently from AAP, which is the American Academy of Pediatrics. So it used to be that the baby should be in the crib. And now they actually recommend that the baby sleeps with the parents and not in bed. They still don't recommend that, but in the room for up to a year, which is like really big.
Interesting.
Because they found it reduced the risk of SIDS. So they don't say necessarily in bed, but definitely in room. And so I think that has, a lot to say about the whole co-sleeping and how much it does actually help reduce the risk of SIDS. And from my research, I find it also very fascinating that a lot of people that don't want to co-sleep end up taking their baby to the couch because they're afraid to sleep in bed. And the fact is that's actually worse than just falling asleep on the bed with the baby. Because what happens is you're in the couch, and what happens if baby falls? They're literally stuck between a wedge and they have no ability to get themselves up. Whereas if they're in a bed, okay, maybe they, get under the covers or something, or they fall over, they can still kind of lift up their head. So a lot more unfortunate accidents happen when mom and dad are doing really good, consciously saying, yeah, I'm going to listen to the doctors and not co-sleep, but then they end up going to the couch. So I don't recommend that. If you're tired and you need to sleep with baby, do it on the bed safely. And there's ways to do that. There's ways to have safe co-sleeping.
Yes. So, I would, if you could find the link or information about the change, that would be great to link in the show notes. Yeah. I think it's one of those things where science is catching up with us. Yeah. And I find that super interesting because one of the things I wanted to bring up was culturally, in a lot of other cultures, co-sleeping is seen as the norm. Mm-hmm. And I always found it interesting that in the United States, what I have been exposed to, that it was seen as such a big no-no. And yet I think statistically, when I was reading about this, it says more than 85% of the world and other cultures, more than 85% of the world co-sleeps with their child, at least for the first few months.
Yeah.
And I find it even more interesting with this new change that they're stating that up to a whole year, that the child should sleep in the same room as the parents. That's a big statement. That's a long time. It's not just the first 3 months. It's not just the first 5 months. They're saying the whole first year. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to mention here, when you mentioned the sleeping on the sofa, I actually have known people to do the same thing where they'll put the baby in a carrier or a wrap and then go sleep on the sofa. And a lot of times where I live in San Francisco, there can be limitation on space. There can be limitation on, so you have to get creative if you are going to have baby in the room and don't want baby in the bed, things like this. But when you're thinking ahead, when you're thinking this could be a possibility, it also will give the option of having that there in a way that's not just sleeping on the sofa with the baby.
Yes.
So if you are not planning for that, then that can end up happening more frequently, versus if you at least provide, this might happen, how would I want it to happen, and how do we want it to look, and what might that look like in the space and situation we have, then at least you're allowing for the opportunity of what we were just saying is safe co-sleeping.
Mm-hmm. And we can go over those.
Yeah. Do you want to start? Did you co-sleep?
I did co-sleep. I just actually want to correct myself here. The AAP recommends for at least the first 6 months.
Okay. 6 months. I was going to say it's a big leap for them to go to a whole year.
It's a year. Yeah.
And I feel that a year, that's a situational thing. As a parent, you have to figure out
what's right for you.
What's going to work for you in your situation. Yeah. But that seems to be more in alignment with the baby soothing to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it's 5 or 6 months where it's like you can't train a baby to sleep longer. The sleep training doesn't really take effect. Nothing's really going to do anything until you hit those 5 or 6 months biologically.
Yeah, until they're older. And it's also recommended not to really start that till I think at least 3 months minimum. And that's still,
that's the fourth trimester is the first 3 months.
Exactly.
We can link back to that episode because that one will be already out. We had mentioned in there, the whole point of the fourth trimester is really baby is still in the gestation stage. They just physically can't grow in our bodies any longer because they would grow too big for our bodies to be able to physically birth them.
Mainly our pelvis. Yeah.
It's like the koala. It's the baby's out and needs to just be close to you and is continuing to socially, mentally develop in those first 3 months. And the closeness to you, there's so many benefits of that.
Yeah.
You did co-sleep.
I did co-sleep. We co-slept for a long time. We got a lot of pushback about it. And I think one of the things that gets brought up a lot, and I definitely want to hit on this topic, is the idea around sex in bed when you co-sleep. I think a lot of people that are against it, they kind of say, well, it's going to ruin your
child for life. You're scarring your child forever. The loving energy is going to scar our child for life. Their little eyes are going to remember.
Like when they're a few months old.
I'm curious about this whole thing because I definitely didn't have child in bed for that whole part, but I could see it happening. And I could also see where it's baby just sleeps the whole time through it.
Yeah. And I mean, especially when they're like 1 to 3 months, right? Or even 1 to 6 months, they're very young. As they start to get older, for sure.
Huh? I was like, I love this. You get it, girl. 1 to 3 months. You were like,
I don't know I actually don't remember the first time postpartum I had sex again, but yeah, I think, and like someone actually, I read this somewhere and this kind of made me feel more comfortable about having sex in bed with a baby, a newborn. And that was kind of the idea that we show kids at such a young age violence and normalize that, but yet we won't, and I'm not saying like just have sex randomly in front of them, but at the same time, kind of what you're talking about, like, yeah, don't show them or have this energy of complete love around them. But yeah, you can go watch a cartoon where they're like shooting, lasers at bad guys or whatever. So I think for me on that's kind of what made me relax a little bit about it. And then as my son got older, we just did it in another room. If he was in bed with us, that's kind of how we moseyed over. And I feel that timing is just something that you feel naturally. You're just at this point where, hey, this is feeling a little awkward to be doing this next to him in bed, as opposed to just going out in the room and on the couch or whatever and taking care of business.
We had one of those travel sleepers. Mm-hmm. So it was those ones that folded up in half, but then when it unfolded, it had like a little rim around it, like the 2-inch rim.
Like a DockATot.
Like a DockATot, but it not as soft. It had the harder little mattress that folded, and then was more stable. So my baby was very small. And surprisingly, there wasn't much concern. I didn't also publicly announce that I was co-sleeping. People like my mom knew, my sister knew. But that's another thing. If you are choosing to co-sleep, maybe know who would be supportive and who wouldn't, and just share it with people who would support you in whatever your desire is. And we used that because it felt like a nice in between of some sense of quote unquote safety there. There was this little rim, the baby had its own little space that we could make sure it was on top of the blankets in our bed. And we placed that between us. And that was our primary thing to start with. And of course, as baby got older, bigger, I would pull her into bed with me more from that little center space. And then eventually what we did was we moved that travel bed, the folding one, to the floor next to our bed. And that's what we would do, is put her to sleep. Or when we wanted the bed space, we would put that on the floor and have our bed space. It was very easy to transport her in that little container. It's like we could just, they're less than 12 pounds normally.
Right.
You can slide your hands under that and just carry it around. So it's almost like a mobile mattress with a tiny rim. And then from there, we graduated to a mini crib mattress we put on the floor and would put her to bed on the mini crib mattress. And somebody had this idea, I can't remember when, and they said, you need to create some space, some kind of, and I think it was more of, we were doing things in the room after we wanted to put her to bed, or she would be down sleeping, and then we felt we had to tiptoe around. And they came up with the idea of a little teepee, the kid teepee. So we ended up in a corner of our room putting a little kid's teepee with the floor, the mattress, the mini crib mattress in the kid's teepee on the floor. And we called it the sleepy teepee. And that for, I want to say up to a year and a half was where she slept in our room in this little teepee. And it worked. Like after she was asleep, we would just, zip up the little flap. She would be in her sleepy teepee. And then at night, my child would wake up at least once a night for many, many months into the years. And it was just very easy. I would just, at that point, when she would wake up, I would walk over, get her, and bring her into bed with me. But at least that was somewhat giving us some more space, and also her some more space without necessarily making things difficult or having to have a big space for a crib or anything like that. We definitely went on that Montessori floor mattress path.
Yeah. It's nice. And I think too, I mean, sleeping in general, I love sleep. So I've done a lot of research on it just for myself, not so much. I mean, I know things for babies, but we like to feel like kind of safe and protected when we sleep. And I love the idea that you have that TP2 to be able to close off and like turn on lights if you need to, and like still have her kind of protected in that way. So I think that's really interesting.
I'll try to find a photo and throw that into the show notes too. It was fun.
Yeah, that would be awesome. And now I think it's really cool because there's so many ways to kind of co-sleep. I mean, they have like, it's almost like a sidecar where you can raise it up to bed level, and they're basically sleeping with you, but on this own little bed on the side. I think one of the biggest benefits about co-sleeping, especially when you're breastfeeding, is that you actually don't have to like fully wake up. You don't have to like get out of bed, walk over to the crib or anything. Like you just get to kind of wake up, maybe sit up, roll over. I loved laying sideline and breastfeeding.
Sideline breastfeeding is a game changer. It took a couple months for that to work for us because of baby size. And when you're first, usually the first month, that's not something, sometimes it will, especially if you've had other kids, just come naturally and be easy. However, usually it comes a little bit later if it's your first. And once it comes, it's the greatest. You can just sleep while you're breastfeeding.
Yeah, you kind of don't even really wait. Like for me, I felt like I was kind of like, I knew I woke up, but it was very
automatic, almost like sleepwalking, but it's sleep breastfeeding.
Exactly. And I do agree that position, I call it like an advanced breastfeeding position, is generally a little bit harder. So it does take longer, but once you get it, it's amazing. And even if you don't have it and you have to sit up in bed, it's still nicer than having to get up out of bed and going to get baby and that whole thing. And baby's right there too. So I think that's great. I also want to just talk about like the way to safely co-sleep, because I think this is also where we get into judgments about other people that co-sleep. And some of the safe things about co-sleeping is that, number one, blankets, right? Blankets need to actually be removed, especially heavy ones, because they can't be able to necessarily like lift up the blanket. The other thing is that anyone that's in the bed should not be on any drugs. So sleeping pills, alcohol, they've had a drink, anything like that, that's going to also make it unsafe for them to sleep with them. And toddlers can actually be not the safest either. But families that I know of that have multiple kids, they'll do kind of like maybe baby on one side near the edge because baby can't roll over yet, and then mom, and then toddler, and then dad, or something like that, or however it works out. And I'm sorry to do like a mom and dads, but however the family is, adult, toddler, adult, and then baby. And that can also make it safer as well.
I don't know how poor people fit in a bed. Must be a California king or something. Even just with one child and two adults in a bed for us is a lot.
There's this one family that just put like a ton of beds together. Like it was like a whole room of beds. It was really, really sweet. And I just thought it was like the sweetest thing. And I think it's nice. I mean, besides
the other option too is you can get a side rail, just like you would for a toddler. So if you're going to do adult, toddler, adult, baby, maybe you put a side rail on the side that the baby's on, even if they aren't rolling, just as that added protection or sense in your mind of safety.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of ways you can, even with babies, roll a towel and have that there because they're so young, they're not kicking and flailing their limbs yet. Baby's not gonna kick the towel off the bed. They would potentially maybe roll into it and the towel would stop them.
Very much like a DockATot. Yeah, like a modified one.
Or use those. What is your thought on the DockATot? I have heard mixed things about using the DockATot for sleep.
Oh, really? What have you heard?
I've heard from some people that it is unsafe. I'm not in agreement or disagreement.
Yeah.
However, I've heard because it's soft.
Yeah.
And maybe this comes back to is baby rolling or not. And if they're rolling, they could potentially roll and then face would be. And I think this is a good segue into wanting to potentially just brainstorm and talk about babies have a lot more common sense than we want to give them.
Yes.
They will, again, like you said, if a blanket's on, they will move their head away, and their noses are also super soft. So when they're face down, because you can think about breastfeeding, their nose actually can flare out to the side, even if it's like down in something.
Right.
So it's important to be aware. However, babies actually have a lot more common sense than we give them credit for. And they have a lot more safety instincts than we give them credit for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And also too, I think mother instincts. I don't know if you remember, but like oftentimes I would kind of wake up before my son was even fully awake and he was just kind of starting to stir. So I think those instincts are there as well too. Again, as long as you're not doing things that is going to disturb that, such as drinking heavily or taking sleeping pills or something like that, that's going to obviously change your reaction to things. But mostly I do think that our bodies intuitively also know about that stuff. And yeah, just the breastfeeding alone, I find it really interesting how many people like, can they breathe? It's like, I know it doesn't make logical sense that like their mouth is smushed against a breast and it doesn't look like they have any way to breathe by their nose, but somehow they do it. It's quite amazing.
Yeah, the mother instinct thing, and this can lead on to as baby gets older and needing the rest, actually, you will be surprised at how much you do wake up, way more than you need to. You will wake up at every little stir sometimes, and that can lead into where you decide what's going to work for you and your family. And that's where sometimes the co-sleeping, I've seen parents say, I can't do this anymore. It's a little bit too much. I'm not getting rest because baby is in bed. and they're so intuitively or instinctually, or there are people who have anxiety and they wake up too much because baby's right there. And this is where you need to assess for your family and yourself what's going to work. And potentially, I really like the idea of baby still being in room, because I do believe that actually you get better sleep, all the things that in general, everyone's going to be happier. However, sometimes that doesn't even work. And that's when sometimes if there are two parents, you can say, okay, one parent takes the shift and sleeps in that room with baby one night. Or if you have the ability to have two spaces and things like that. Maybe it is even that one parent sleeps on the sofa and you put a bassinet on the ground next to the sofa, and that parent is out there so the mom can get a little bit more separated and not have to every little stir wake up when baby potentially isn't waking up to feed as they get a little bit older.
Yeah. And going back to I love the baskets. I love the Moby baskets. I think those are great. And I also think that babies, and just naturally as human beings, we want to be with people when we sleep, right? Like I remember when my son was born, like the thought of putting him in another room alone just seemed very unnatural. And I couldn't imagine even, going back to like our ancestral roots, if we were out, like even as cave people, right? We wouldn't want to like sleep in the open all alone. We'd want to find like something close to a tree or like in a cave and with people, not totally subjected to being alone. And I think that's like within our being and our genetics still. And so I do really believe that babies sleep better when there is family around, and babies can smell mom's breast milk up to like 15 feet. So if you're in a room, generally baby's going to be able to at least, hey, mom's here, I'm safe, I can sleep better.
Yes, I'm safe. And as baby gets older, I smell booby. I want a booby. They wake up every time. And that can be something as baby gets past 5-6 months, you can start experimenting with, does baby sleep a little bit longer? If they're a little bit further from the booby, and sometimes they will, and sometimes they won't. And it's all a dance. That's where it becomes a dance. And ultimately, I always tell people, do what's going to give you the most rest. Whatever that is, that's going to be the best solution.
Yeah.
You're well rested, you're happier, everyone else around you is happier, baby is happier. And it's a chicken and egg thing, just as you said. If baby is waking up all the time because they don't feel safe or secure or around you, then you're potentially not as well rested because baby's waking up, you're having to wake up. So it's this chicken and the egg thing. But generally, if you're well rested, baby's better rested, baby's happier, you're happier, everyone's happier. And that's going to evolve. I think that's a very important thing. What's working at 1 month and working at 3 months and working at 6 months is all going to be potentially different. And it continues to change. It can change, week by week, but generally it's, every month or 2 months, you might want to reassess what's working.
Yeah. And I remember what I was going to say when you're talking about the baby and the mom waking up or the parent waking up often, is that babies, I think one really surprising thing is how noisy babies are. I don't know if you remember this, but they're like, I don't even know what noises they make, but there's just so many little noises that I'm like, wow, I forget these little, because usually when you're holding them during the day, you don't hear it. But at night when it's quiet, it's like, wow, they make a lot of noises. And if you're a light sleeper, that would definitely disturb your sleep and could be a little bit harder. I think also on that note that it's also good in the beginning when we're waking up to those little noises, because getting a crying baby to the breast when we're just learning to breastfeed is almost near impossible. Like you need to calm down baby. So if you are waking up before and you hear those noises, you're waking up before you're putting baby right on breast, it just makes that whole process a lot easier until they get older, like you said, and it's a different game at that point. But yeah, I just wanted to go back and mention how noisy babies are, because sometimes we forget.
Babies they make much more noise than we expect, for sure.
Yeah.
Is there anything else? I don't think we need to expand too much. What I really wanted to get with this conversation is just generally the take home of no judgment, whatever you choose. I think that's the biggest thing. Each family is going to choose what's going to work best for them. And if you choose not to do any form of co-sleeping, great. Like if that's what works for you, just to encourage though, and open the possibility and idea that it is more common than people think. Even in the United States, I feel every person I have ever worked with that has had a baby has done some form of co-sleeping. And no judgment, whatever you choose to do, and do what works best for you, and potentially explore the possibility of trying to find some form and way. And that co-sleeping can look there's so many ways that it can look. Yeah. It doesn't necessarily just mean baby in the bed directly next to you. It can look very differently for each family. And that's what's so cool, is you can get really creative with how you co-sleep.
Yeah. And it's true. They said, I think the statistics is at one point, like 1 in, I don't know, 5, I don't even know the statistics, but at one point a family will co-sleep with their baby. And it's just the way that it works out. You're tired, baby's tired. And, baby's been in the womb for 9 months, listening to your heartbeat, all confined. And to put them in this open crib, which it might not look big to us, but it's big to them, that's a hard transition. So that's why I believe a lot of people end up co-sleeping, is because we're tired and baby's happy and they're sleeping. It's like, why not? Let's join them in the sleeping process and do it safely. That's the most important thing. Just do it safely. Like, don't put a ton of pillows around. Don't have blankets. Don't sleep on the couch unless they're in a carrier. Don't be drinking a ton of alcohol or having your partner on sleeping meds, those type of things. I mean, they can be on sleeping meds, but in another bed.
Yeah. On that point, if you do have to take something or choose to take something that impairs, I would say if you're consuming anything that would slightly impair you, do another option. You can get creative with potentially putting the baby on
sidecar
next to the mattress, or putting them like close to you. You can still have them close to you in the room. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to completely remove them. If you have the basket that the baby's in, you can put them in a safe, their own space and container where there isn't the potentiality of a blanket being tossed on top of them, or you rolling over, whatever it is. So there's still ways to, because who knows, people choose to do what they're going to do, and also might be on a medication for something or whatever it is. So it does come up, and it does not necessarily mean baby needs to be in a completely different room from you. In some ways, that's actually, in those situations, it's better, again, babies in the same room. Yeah. I also want to just mention, because we've been talking mostly about really the first 6 months, but even if we think about later on, even if your child was a crib baby from the beginning, really in the spectrum of a child's life, don't they always come running into our rooms and want to be in bed? Yes. And I heard some weird, this could be totally woo and some made up myth that somebody said, but I did hear somebody say that sometimes if a child hasn't co-slept, they're more likely when they're older to want to fulfill that need, and they're more likely to actually really want to sleep with you every night as they get older, because that they haven't had that what you were saying, this intrinsic biological need of some weird subconscious safety and security through this co-sleeping hasn't been established, and somehow they just naturally come back to it if they didn't get it when they were a baby. So who knows, maybe it's all BS, but maybe it isn't. I don't know.
I like it. I think that's one of the biggest pushbacks I got was, well, what are they going to do when they're older? And it's like, I don't think I'm going to be having a 20-year-old or a high school boy be laying in bed with me. And even then, like, I remember as a kid, like you said, going into my parents' room older, or even in the morning when I got older, and like laying with them, like watching cartoons or whatever. Yeah, I think that's such a great point.
I'll out myself really quick. When I hit my teenage years, I was sleeping with my mom almost every night. Yeah. I just wanted to. Yeah. And then when somebody told me this thing about coming back to it at a later time in life, I'm like, maybe that was why. And yeah, for years between the ages of, I would say 15 to 18, it was what I want. I just wanted to, my mom had a huge bed, but it felt so comforting to just sleep in my mom's bed every night with her.
Yeah. And I think and the other thing too is like, what's so wrong with it? Like, what's the big deal? And I think, again, that goes back to that whole question. No judgment. And it goes back to that, well, what is right for your family, bottom line? And I'm really happy AAP changed their standpoint that they should be at least in the room, and they call it co-sleeping, but it's not like what I think of co-sleeping, which is in the bed. They mean co-sleeping in the room, but up to 6 months, I give them credit for that because I'm impressed.
I'm sure it will continue to evolve too.
Yeah.
Science will catch up with our woo-woo witchy minds.
One day it'll happen. Yeah. And thanks for bringing up that point. It's a really good one. So,
yeah. Cool. All right. Well, hopefully this conversation inspired you in some way. And I always love to hear the creative ways people do co-sleeping, especially if they have multiple kids.
Mm-hmm.
So if you haven't yet gone to our site, check it out. There is an option where you can just leave a voice message for us. Leave us a voice message and tell us your weird way that you co-sleep or what you're planning on doing.
And
we listen to them all. We respond to them all. We love it. So
Awesome.
Cool.
Hey there, amazing listeners. We just want to say a huge thank you for tuning into our convo on the Just This podcast today. We appreciate each and every one of our listeners, and your continued support means the world to us.
If you enjoyed this episode and found value in it, we would be incredibly grateful if you could take a moment to leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform or share this episode with someone you think would enjoy it too. Your reviews and shares not only motivate us, but they also help others discover our show.
We're also all about keeping the conversation going and hanging out with our incredible community. Head over to justthis.site, that's JUSTTHIS.SITE, where you'll find additional resources, ways to connect with us, and join the conversation, plus some more goodies.
Thank you again for being a part of the Just This community. We'll be back soon. Until next time, remember to take care of yourself and embrace the wonder as you navigate this extraordinary adventure.